Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts around the world just absolutely crazy, I'm your host, your big dog, Luke Robinson, and welcome to this episode of Fuzzybutts and Friends. And I'd like to welcome back to this episode. Every so often we have her. We're not really sure when we get her. Ginger Morgan. She is the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it's so appropriate this episode because we're almost at the 4-month mark from the beginning of walk 3. My walk in memory of and honor for the Fuzzybutt 3 that I lost to cancer, Hudson. It begins on September the 4th, and sort of in honor and in preparation for walk 3, I'm so glad, Ginger, to have with us this episode a true friend of mine. He's pretty much everything I think that people thought I was when they heard I was walking cross country with my Fuzzybutts, but when they actually met me, he's like, nah, that's not the guy that I thought I was going to meet.
Oh my God.
Jonathon Stalls. He's a crazy guy. He's done so many crazy adventures. John, how are you?
I'm great. It's just good to be here with you, brother, and with you, Ginger. Honored. Just honored.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
It's a tremendous honor. You know, I got to start off this episode. I always try to think about what's the right way to start things. And I kind of like to stir up a little bit of trouble when I start things out. And I think I'm gonna do that this time. So I gotta ask you, we gotta whip it out. We gotta talk turkey. How many miles in total have you walked, my friend?
Oh my gosh.
I've done 4,000.
Wow.
Officially 4,000.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, man. So, I mean, I walk anywhere from 8 to 20 a day. So
Wow.
Even with my work. So but in terms of long distance, like if we're just talking like trips, I mean,
like a long distance walk. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's close to 7 or 8, maybe 10,000.
Oh my God.
Just because it's so many multi-week, multi-month, like since 2010. Yeah.
Well, that's, I knew you were going to blow my number out of the water. I knew that because I follow you on all of the social media. So I still, even though it's been some time since our past last connected, I still track you in all your adventures, but I knew it was a big number. So you're probably 2.5, maybe 3 times officially more than what I've done on long distance walks. So you've done a lot of walks. So let's break those down, my brother. So let's start with the first one. Now I couldn't recall, John, was the Delaware or the East Coast to San Francisco, was that your first long distance walk?
Yeah, that was the very first. I had no idea what I was doing, breaking the ice, all the things, diving in. My pack was 95 pounds, which is an indicator for not really knowing what I was doing. So yeah, 2010 of March, that was it. That started it all.
So
yes.
2010, that was your first walk. And how many miles was that?
It was just over 3,000. So 3,030.
Okay. So, wow. So to my first walk, that's how we connected, was 2,400. Yes. Mine was Austin to Boston. But I had a bigger number than you because I did compare stats. I walked across 16 states plus DC. How many states did you walk across?
I know. I only did 14.
Yeah.
Only 14 states.
Yeah. But it is interesting how many the difference between walking horizontal versus vertically in the United States. And man, I got to tell you, when I was writing, it took me several days to sort of confine the talking notes and the script for this episode because there are so many different angles and things I want to talk to you about. Because you've seen a side of the world that I've witnessed firsthand, and I guess the kind of way I want to start off the show is something that I don't think about and people don't really talk about, is that it really is a fairly small fraternity of people that have done these long distance adventures. So we don't really think about 3,000 miles as a lot, but man, 3,000 miles across 14 states is a long distance. First of all, how long did that take you?
Yeah, so for me, it was 8.5 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I,
mine was over 2 years, but the other thing is the reason why we walked was entirely different. So
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I thought people mostly know why I walk. I'm not like you. I don't walk just because you were nature designed you. You're genetically designed to be this walker, a walking man. Nature did not design me that way. So I walk when I lose a dog to cancer. That's when it's time to
Yeah,
get me to get out of my shell and actually get out
absolutely.
and walk for a cause. But we walk for different things. But tell us what the first your first walk. What was the cause for that?
Yeah, that's yeah. So two primary things. I mean, honestly, for me initially, and this is where I think you and I did align a little bit. I mean, this was a very personal thing initially. Like I just needed an experience that would help me process things, that would help me. And I think that's where you and I connected a lot with the pups and just being in process with hard things, grief things. That was actually a primary. I needed a restart. I needed a reboot. Um, so it was just this like, all right, I got to do something to recalibrate everything and slow down and be with all these things. So that was primary. And then I wanted to support a cause similar to you. So wanted to kind of get out of that place or something that would bring me out of that place, but also raise awareness for something I believed in. And so there's an organization called Kiva that supports just sustainable, amazing micro lending opportunities for small businesses all over the world and here in the US. So I was just doing a lot of talks and education and invitation around inviting people to support small entrepreneurs all over the world and in the US who are just needing that startup income to get things going. And so I was just, that was just, it was called Kiva Walk, and we had like a micro lending team, and it was so cool. It was just fun to weave those things. And, but very much initially what the main ache was
I
just to
like what you
recalibrate,
said, and for me, it's strikingly similar. Is that there's a personal component to why you walk,
Mhm.
and yours was grief. Yours where you were processing. You were at a kind of a juncture, or an
Yeah,
intersection, or inflection point in your life,
big
and you
time.
just had to get on the road, and that's what you were called to do.
Yeah.
And then there was the cause
Mhm.
component of the walk too, and I believe that, John. I firmly believe that because I would not and would not make the spectacle of myself backpack in cross country when I'd never, like you, I'd never done anything like that before,
Yeah.
ever in my life, before I took on a 2,400-mile walk. And I certainly didn't know what the heck I was doing. And a lot of it was on the job training. But I did it because for a cause. I did it. I had to do it for something greater than myself. I'm solipsistic. Some people can say that fairly about me. I'm self-indulgent, that's for sure. Most everybody can say that, but I'm not that
Yeah.
kind of person where I have to go out and put my life at risk and the life of my loved ones, the Fuzzybutts, at risk just for some type of self-edification, some type
Yeah.
of, I want to leave my legacy on Mark, so let me just get out there and do that. And I think you're the same way, that you did have to do that for something greater than yourself.
Oh, majorly. And yeah, it was so loud for me. I watched the movie Into the Wild. I was going through some really hard things. I stumbled across Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins. And it was just this 1 week gut slam of like, you have to do this like, it wasn't out of, yeah, it wasn't performative. It wasn't, I mean, even though there is like a genuine, like, I want people to connect to it. I want people to be a part of the cause. I want people, but it was really just, I got to move and process some things. And I'll never forget our initial connection, reaching out to you related to your pups. Cause I was like, I also want to have, um, a shelter, like a dog from a shelter, a furry friend to kind of move with, to connect with, to just listen to and care for along the way. And so I was terrified of how to do that with care and how to do that well, and not knowing what would be good or wouldn't be good. And so reaching out to you was such a huge, um, just an invitation of permission with a lot of guidance on how to do it with care, because it's a whole different dynamic when you have that relational buddy system that looks out for, you're looking out for each other. Anyway, it was so helpful to have you at the very beginning, brother.
It was, and I love this. I love to keep you talking because everything you say, I just want to talk more about because I always have examples. We could talk for hours of examples, but that's so true. But what's funny is you mentioned Peter Jenkins. Was it Jenkins? Yeah, Peter Jenkins, the Walk Across America guy. Ironically, he lives in Tennessee, Thompson Station outside of Nashville. But I didn't know that before I started my first walk. And I had his email and I tried to reach out to the dude and he never got back to me.
No.
So I tried to connect. And then there was a really big hefty fella on the West Coast, a former military guy that was going to walk from the West Coast to New York to lose weight. And I reached out to him. Everybody I reached out to saying, hey, I've never done this. I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, but I would like some type of guidance, or am I insane? Should I rethink it? Because you want that second set of eyes. You have this vision, like you said, it hits you. But then then there's the reality. It's like, my God, what am I committing to? What have I done? And that's a reality, especially when you're involving your loved one with your companion. Right. And that's the third component that you had. So you have some sort of personal compelling motive. You have a cause, something greater that you're doing it for. Yeah. And then the third thing is a companion. And that's the other thing that we shared, my brother, is that you started off your first walk with a companion too. So tell us about Kanoa.
Just my whole heart, my everything, unconditional love, mirroring back every day. My best friend, he's amazing. He's still with me, still with us. He does have thyroid cancer. So my connection to your work is even more, it's just that it's so relational now with him as we care for that and figure that out. And I mean, he's 13, so he's going on to 14. His hips are kind of giving out, but he's a mixed husky blue heeler mix. So he's got like the wildness of a herding breed and the independent, just very vocal aspects of a husky.
He's beautiful.
Oh, he's just amazing. And goofy and just like me, but he's super alert. I mean, even at 13, he just notices his hearing has gone out now, but he's every move I make, every time I open the door, he's right there. Anytime I cross, he's just right there. And we walk.
Well, first of all, anything we can do, myself, the puppy, on behalf of the Puppy Up Foundation for Kanoa going through cancer therapy, whatever we can do, we have a lot of contacts. We've made a lot of friends in my travels, and we know everybody all the way up to the top. So we don't pull any strings because every one of our companions needs good treatment, but we can certainly get some answers a little bit quicker sometimes and help things along the way. So if there's anything that you or Kanoa needs, my friend, you let me know. We'll talk more about that offline. Okay. But you're right. What a world. I think just life in of itself means, and the difference it makes when you have a companion, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And so you've had Kanoa since Kanoa was a pup, is that right?
Yeah, he was I got him from a shelter when he was a year, and his little card at the shelter was, they named him Alfalfa. They found him on an interstate, and he just had, this is one of those moments where you go and you're like, I'm not gonna get a dog. I'm just going in to look, like that whole thing. And then, of course, the whole time he's just behind and I was leaning in. I wasn't sure. I was very much experimenting with how does this feel to invite a dog with me on this long walk. I mean, I really wanted to be really careful about that and thoughtful about it. But he was kind of hiding under the bench. All the other dogs were kind of jumping up at the edge of the different glass areas where you're walking through, and he's just chilling under the bench, just like, but he's watching me the whole time. He'd been there for 4 weeks. He had mangled knots in his hair, and just he was, he'd been roaming for a long time on interstates. You could tell for a while. And it just was clear. I lost all control, kept looking at me. I kept looking at him, got into a visitation room, and he just jumped all over me. It was over within minutes. and it was just clear his energy level, his already kind of roaming, nomadic entry into the world. It was just a clear signal that, with the right amount of care and relational support between us, like this was going to be an amazing journey. And it was. We could spend hours talking about that walk and the things that came up between us. Oh my goodness.
Well, we can, but I actually have some pictures to share with the audience. So
Yeah.
I tried to do this in one of my previous episodes, and I didn't do a good job of it because I'm not the Zoom expert, but I'm going to try it now, John. I'm going to share some photos that I was able to capture or find on the internet from your first walk. So why don't you walk us through these right here? Can you see them?
Oh, yes. So this is, this was from, this was such a great article from New York Times. So it was a capture of 3 different cross-country walkers who were all moving kind of around the same time. So the 2 photos where I'm in the bottom right in the middle of rural Nevada, just sitting on Highway 50 with that orange tank top. And so that's me on the bottom right, looking out in the middle of the high desert. And then that's another photo with the Highway 50 sign. Those 2 are from my walk. The other are different people who were journeying at the same time. It doesn't show Kanoa here because I ended up not taking Kanoa through the high desert. It didn't feel at all good for him. The heat, part husky. It was just, I had friends take care of him through Utah and Nevada, which was really hard to say goodbye to him for that amount of time. But I had some amazing friends that brought him back out when I reached California. So,
in my own way, I screwed that entirely up. That was the only article that I could find that had multiple pictures up, and I didn't take the time to because my co-host and occasionally my producer was supposed to ask you for some pictures up front. And anyway, I screwed that up. However, it did bring us to this really important, I think, part of your journey that I played a part in too, and I thought was important because it speaks to something so important. One of I think the most important lessons that you learn on the road when traveling with your companion, John, and that is you started off your first walk with Kanoa, with your mates for the first half. And then our paths, actually, we physically met in Colorado because my walk had ended. I'd gone out to work with Ed on my book that still hasn't been published. And so then we heard you were out there. We met with you. We brought you over to Ed's house. We cooked a big meal, sat by a fire pit. We swapped some really awesome stories. And then we had a really great conversation about your second part of your journey and Kanoa. So tell us about that. Tell us about the conversation and the decision that you had to make.
Yeah, it was just really, again, another point of processing with you and someone who just is so close to kind of that relational field of care with animals. And I was just really discerning. I was just like, to not, because it was the tension was really tough. I mean, from a physical standpoint, I was very much leaning to not, because there were just some significant signs, not all the time, but just when we were moving through Missouri and Kansas, where the pause, the heat, part husky, it just was like, that it changed our daily mileage capacity, which was fine, but it was definitely, I was learning what his capacities were and weren't, just in terms of healthy movement and mobility. And there were times in Kansas where he just laid down and be like, I'm not going, you go.
Right.
Good luck. I ain't going a step. Thank you for the walk.
Are you sure he's not part Pyrenees?
Right. Totally. Yeah. So there was just some important physical signals, but the other thing that was pushing against that was just we have just been at each other's side 24 hours a day for 6 months, 5 months. I mean, every day, every waking hour, he's right next to me, sleeping in the tent, every meal. I mean, the proximity, the relational, the protection. So to all of a sudden have him away from me, I was really worried about just about who am I entrusting that care? Who's going to care for that level of, but also how is he going to respond and react to that? How is that going to feel to him? So it was just a hard decision. And at the end of the day, we got to that place with, an amazing exchange with you and others, just to be like, at the end of the day, like the physical thing was really like, he'll join you at the end. But this really needs to be cared for. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that conversation. Yeah, we were. I think we just had a wonderful dinner that I made.
Yes.
Because that's something I learned on my walk. Is I've stayed with so many families, I had to cook with them to thank, and so I developed some mad cooking skills in the kitchen. We'll get to families and the wonderful families you stay with in a minute, but we were sitting by the fire pit afterwards, and you leaned over and you confided in with me, and you asked me. This is the first time we had ever met physically. You said, "Hey, let me ask you a question. I'm really having to make a tough decision.
Mhm.
I'm about to go on the second part of my walk, and we're going to have some tough terrain ahead, man. And I think you went through Moab, and I know enough about Moab to know, man, that's like 80 miles of no service, and that's dangerous, and that's potentially deadly. There's no shade coverage. There's nothing."
Yeah.
And so you opened up, man. You're really awesome.
Mhm.
You're that kind of person, man. You opened up to me and you confided and asked me. You said, "What do you think?" And my response is, the one thing that I learned on the road is you've got to go with your instinct
Yeah.
on the road, because that is the one barometer, that is the one compass
Mhm.
that in the times when you have to make tough decisions in like
Yes.
0.2 second situations, that's the thing you have to lean into and rely on. And everyone says that in life, but on the road, it's
Yes.
10 times more
100%.
true.
Yes.
And so, John, what you said to me when we're talking is you're just saying, "Man, my feeling says no, don't. It's too dangerous and too risky." And so I think right then and there, I think you made a decision
Mhm.
that to go with it, because I know on my walk, and now I've done 2 walks, about to go on my third. And the thing I learned is the times that I didn't go with my instinct, I'm fairly certain it was not the right decision.
Mhm.
But the times I did, always I'm
Mhm.
100% confident that it was the right way to go, especially as it pertained to my companions, my boys,
Yeah.
because like there's a personal component to me and why I walk cross country. But at the end, I am the guardian. I am
Mhm.
the caretaker and the keeper of my companions.
Right.
And that's a responsibility that you have to take totally, totally serious. So
Completely.
you made a tough decision. I would not have made that decision, because for me, the walk would not have been the same for me. But I didn't go through the
Yeah.
desert, and I
Right.
specifically have never ever made that. I will never ever do a walk across a desert with my dogs, because that's crazy
Yeah.
terrain.
I mean, it is. It
Bad
is.
was How bad was Moab? That was tough, right?
Oh man, it was. So I was very like, just from the beginning, I've just always been drawn to the desert to go. I've always been like to just be lost in that like abyss. I love it in a weird, way. And so I'm drawn to it. So I just knew like I had my eyes set on going through those, days without seeing a person. And so it was very clear like that's a very personal thing that is not necessarily something I really need to care for, whether I bring Kanoa into that or not. But it was just such a clear, like, I want to be out in the desert. I mean, so many stories. So Moab was actually amazing. You're right. It is not, it is hot. It is hard. Uh, Naps in culverts underneath the highway that are actually quite clean, but not necessarily stress free. And it's dry. You're you're all the reasons. But one of my favorite stories, and you know this from your walks, is I had several people who would just be like, what are you doing out here? Way out here. And I'm like, well, just, and I borrowed a dear friend, Polly Latovsky, who's this, to your point of like a small circle of people who do this. Polly she's called the global walker. She did a 22, I forget how long, 22 months. It was longer than that, 5 years of walking around the world. And she had this a custom Bob baby stroller so I swapped my backpack for this push stroller for my time through the desert. And so you have people pulling over that are like, what are you doing with a baby out in the middle of the desert? And I'm like, y'all, not a baby. It's just lots of water. It's like things that I need. And they would, they'd realize that. And then they would ask me like, hey, can we help? What can we do? Or I would ask them because it was an opportunity. And I said, well, if you're coming back, if you can get a couple jugs of water, a 6-pack of beer, and gummy bears.
You had your priorities.
What? Like no nutritional value other than just water to hydrate. And I just wanted sugar and beer. I wanted to look forward to it. So I said, can you bury that at mile marker 227? And they did. And I would get to mile marker 227. There'd be a little note. Sometimes they'd put like some extra things, but to unearth in the middle of the desert as the sun is going down, this cold, because it's in the ground, they dug it deep, cold beers and water and gummy bears as the sun goes down in the desert. Oh my God, y'all, it was heaven.
It is amazing. God, we could talk about, go ahead, Ginger, sorry.
I'm glad to hear that the beer was cold.
Right. And an important detail. I was like, please, like, if you can, like, if just a little bit deeper, you might think, this is deep enough. Just go a little bit deeper to keep it cold.
Yeah. Hot. Yeah. No, when you said that, I was thinking hot beer. How?
Oh, yeah. No,
it is amazing the little things that make a world of difference life on the road, because you did it the way I did it, which was legit in the sense that you didn't have a follow vehicle. No. You were walking and then finding a safe place to pitch a tent, sleeping however many hours you could sleep. Then as soon as the sun would rise, you'd break tent, then get back on the road and walk, which is pretty much how I did almost my entire first half of the walk. Then I had so many people following us that the first walk, then the offer was always there for a place for us to stay. Totally. And then I would stay more so with families, because my job was also sharing Malcolm's story that dogs get cancer, and it's the same type of cancer that people get, and that we need to allocate resources to understanding why. And so my job was really kind of walking from town to town and sharing Malcolm's story. And that's why mine took a little bit longer than yours. But I tell you what, my West Coast walk was more like that Moab and stuff, because I thought I made so many mistakes on my West Coast walk. It's not even funny. I thought like Route 1 all the way up that runs parallel to I-95 up in like the Northeast in New England. I thought Highway 1 or 101 on the West Coast would be like a convenience store or some type of service every 10, 20 miles. And man, there are forests and mountains and dunes, gigantic dunes for tens and tens of miles. And I got lost. We got lost to the point for days, and Ginger had no idea where we were. And Ginger would have some bicyclists that would pass us, and I would give them a note. Please call the director of our foundation and let her know that we're alive. So
I got a call from this guy, and he goes, "Hey, this guy with 2 big dogs told me to call you and tell you that he's okay."
Amazing.
I'm like, and this was like after 3 days, and I'm like about to get on a plane, to go hunt them down. I'm like, well, thank you. And then I didn't hear from Luke again for like a couple of days. I was
West Coast was wild, and more importantly, just 10 times more dangerous on Pacific Coast Highway, because you did, obviously you did highways, byways, back roads, and country roads like me. You didn't do any like PCT, or you didn't do any big trail systems, right?
No, I mean, I would take a couple days I'd do like a day or a half day on trails, but mostly, it was going through towns. You and I had a similar, which is what I love, is it's such a unique way of moving through. It's not the long distance trails. You're moving constantly through communities and towns, but yes, the winding small highways are
That's the danger. Most people don't understand that's the funny thing and interesting thing about that is that people always ask me, it's like, well, why didn't just you do the AT, the Appalachian Trail? Because I kind of did Austin to Boston my first walk. It does kind of snake part of that. I could have caught that in Georgia and done most of that, but I'm like, well, I'm walking to educate people about cancer and our companion animals. And if I wanted to educate trees and nature, I would do the AT. But if I want to talk to people and share my mission, I've got to be on the road. But you know, but people don't understand, Jon, you and I know so intimately how dangerous that is and the danger it represents, right?
Major, like just the stories of endless stories.
Well, let's talk about it. I'm fascinated about yours because I have my own. But before we do, I made a list of the dangers, everything that could take us out on the road, and it was always number one was traffic. So man was always number one. So tell me some of your crazy stories where people almost took you out.
Oh, this is actually, I share this story in the book that we'll talk about, but like it's like this in detail, like because it's the one at the very top that's just like I'll never forget it ever. And there's so many like it, hundreds, especially since I do so much of this walking still and all like my daily art and life. But the one was it was on our walk. It was in outside of Moundsville, West Virginia. And so we're making our way up this, this rural ridge highway that's really beautiful. You're seeing farmland in both directions. It's storybook, like it's just amazing rolling hills of farms. But this ridge small highway is the most direct path to Moundsville. And there was a section where I'm kind of, because to your point of instinct, it's like you start to you pick up instinct. I may not fully see it yet, but my body is sensing this is not going to be good. So you need to start navigating some other options. Are there other options? So I started to feel like, okay, this isn't going to be good. So what's around me? And right on my left, there was a chain link fence to this large property that was right up on the shoulder. So all I had was I was in the road, in the highway. Kanoa was between the fence and me in the little know-nothing shoulder. And when there was a break in traffic, I checked the other side and it was just a straight downhill, like on top of like some different like garbage and different kind of motorhomes that were unused and lots of things that were kind of forgotten and trees, but it was super steep. So you had the steepness and the fence. And it's coming up to a really sharp turn with so many blind spots. And I'm seeing how fast these trucks and semi-trucks and cars are ripping around that turn. And I'm just like, there's no path. And there's so much traffic coming and going. There's no place to sit down and think about it. So I'm getting closer to this turn. And I'm like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Like I'm starting to freak out. I can't, the fence is too high to climb over the fence because I was going to try and do that and see if I could pick up Kanoa and go through. As I'm getting closer to this turn, there's these signs on the fence that say, beware of dogs. And I'm like, I'm not seeing any dogs yet. So I'm really pressing Kanoa and I against the fence as we're kind of taking our way, because if we go too fast, it means I have to be in the road. Cars are coming by, they're honking at us. And then there's a break in traffic. And I'm like, okay, this is the time for us to run. So we're now running with this break in traffic, but now we're in the heart of the turn. And this is like the scariest part of the whole thing, because I can't see on either side of me and in front of me and behind me, the blind spots. And then all of a sudden, like 7 like kind of baby young bulldogs come running out of the house and they start chomping and barking at Kanoa from that side of the fence. So they're barking and going nuts. It's making Kanoa go nuts. He's wondering why, like I'm stressed and he's stressed. So now there's barking and yelping. And then I hear the sound of a semi truck coming. Y'all, it would, so now I'm like, and the semi truck is laying on it. This is all happening within, right, like maybe seconds. It feels like an eternity, but the truck is laying on its horn because it's not going to be able to slow down. I have no options. And so all I can do is I take Kanoa, I grab the fence, I push Kanoa between me and the fence. The bulldogs are biting my fingers, like literally biting the skin off. It's bleeding, they're yelping. I'm now crying and screaming. And my backpack hits, like brushes against the wall of the semi-truck.
Wow. Wow, John,
Wow.
I thought I had the mother of them all. Scary, just terrifying, close call. And I have in terms of vehicles, but you had the dogs in there too. It was like the
Biting
real
the
world
fingers.
live version of Frogger. You had the semis, you had the switchback, you had the
Dude.
zero shoulders, the razor thin shoulders, and you had a wall full of bulldogs.
Biting bulldogs.
Ravenous bulldogs biting you. So you had good God, my friend. Wow. Where was that? West Virginia? Because I want to make sure I never walk through that area.
Never. Ridge
My
Highway.
own West Virginia story. I had some people chasing me, trying to find me because they thought I wasn't doing this for canine cancer or something. West Virginia is kooky. Let's just say that. But interestingly enough, how your first part of the walk, you actually walked part of the. I actually said, hey, if you're going to go this way, go through Madison, Indiana, pick up part of the trail I did. And I had a very similar incident outside of Madison, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the ultimate test for me because the second risk on the road, second to only to humans, are like feral dogs, pack dogs.
Totally.
And I had my share of onesies, just one feral dog, then a pack of two. And I think maybe I'd had a three maybe max by the time I'd gotten to Indiana. But then I had just left Indiana outside, and it was like 5 or 6 of them come running down from a hill where there was a mobile home community where they almost always seemed to come from. And it was like a mix of pit bulls and Rottweilers. And man, they were running they were running at breakneck speed. And
Yes.
I freaked and I froze. And I knew, and I am so glad that I had been road tested by that time because I knew not to run because that's the biggest mistake you can make in that instance. Now I had Murphy and Hudson. Now Murphy was not a small boy. He was a big boy and Murphy was gearing for a fight and Hudson was, God bless him. He didn't really know what to do, but they were coming at us. And I realized my instinct was to puff up and just yell and get and make them afraid. And I did it and it worked. And so the interesting thing is I warned you about that.
You did. I was just going to say
that area, right?
Mm-hmm. You did. Luke, that was the best advice that you gave me. I mean, you gave me tons of advice, brother. I'm so grateful. And one of the biggest pieces of advice you gave me, because that was one of my biggest questions, was what are some of the things I need to be aware of related to not only Kanoa's safety, but the kind of attention he might draw with other dogs, I just was so curious about it. And you were, I can't remember where we were, whether it was before the walk. I think it was to your point, we connected at some point as I was getting into it or as after you experienced that, but I can't remember the timeline, but you were so clear about at a certain point, you just don't run, don't try and fight, just at a certain point, make your stance loud and clear and strong and big and almost shock them. And that will work. That's what's worked for you. And Madison, yes, I had an experience. It wasn't Rottweilers. I don't remember it but I had wild dogs outside of Madison, tons in Indiana. There were several instances and several to follow where wild dogs were kind of coming around. You kind of see them running on the hill. And as they would get closer, discerning that point when I would slam my stick down or slam my foot down and get really loud, or whatever would come out. And that was 100% from you, brother. You were I was like channeling. I'm like, that is what I'm going to do. I was so grateful because it did work every time.
Yeah.
I can see Hudson going, oh, they just want to be friends, Poppy. Don't we want to be friends?
Kanoa is the same. Like Kanoa, like he barks really loud. He barks a mean game, but like as soon as like the intruder enters the house, he's like, oh, let's play. Oh, you're a friend. You're an assumed friend. And so he's weary at first, but as soon as they get closer, so I
But
knew I had to.
what's so fascinating is that what your story is that, man, you have this instinct that you're about to get into a bad situation, and there are sometimes you feel like you're sliding into it, sliding into the inevitable, and you can't stop it because, like you said, you can't backtrack, and that's happened to me so times on the road. And you have no training for what you're into. You've not seen this situation. You've not ever, it's entirely unique, and you can't get out of it. You can't stop and call somebody to come pick you up. And it's you and your companion or companions was me and Hudson in Indiana, or Hudson and Murphy, and then Hudson on walk 1, then Hudson in Indiana on walk 2. And that's it. You've got to get through it. And it really speaks to the power of companionship.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I never had that on the road. They always talk about having a working relationship with your companion. Well, Pyrenees, that's really not an easy thing to do. Pyrenees aren't known for wanting to work a lot. Whereas Kanoa, yours are just like you, where nature made you to be a cross-country walker. So is Kanoa. You guys are just cut from nature. Whereas Pyrenees are like, yeah, I think I'd rather just laze around and not walk across country. So that was my operating environment. Those were my companions. So we had never had, in all seriousness, I had never had a working relationship with my companions before my first walk. But I tell you, just a couple of weeks into walking with and being in those sometimes life-threatening situations, you understand the value of that partnership, which it is a partnership, right, John? And how important that you lean on your partner in times of crisis.
Big time.
So how did Kanoa? So it sounds like Kanoa really stepped up and puppied up in that instance.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, he was on radar. So his radar is he catches it, senses it. He starts to puff up. I mean, he's similar where if they were to get closer, he really would just start wanting to play. Like it's kind of it's a complicated, it's a complicated thing. But from the beginning, his signaling was very like, I'm puffing up. He would have this radar with me, but very much oftentimes in advance of mine, related to a lot of things. And our communication was profound, and it is so obviously beyond the realm of words. You sense when he's picking up something, he senses when I'm picking up something to be weary of, or an opportunity, or someone's coming through the woods, or even sometimes with weather, like he would there were just amazing channels that we connected on, that I had, super intimate and really intuitive.
It really is intuitive. You use that word instinct, and you just can't use it enough on the road, because you live in sedentary normal life. We lose that as human beings. But once we're out in nature, and our survival is to a certain extent a function of our understanding and our interaction with nature. It doesn't take us too long for our intrinsic internal skills to start sensing things like barometric pressure. Yes. I'm sure like you, I'm sure like me, you could share a ton of stories where you woke up and just felt and knew something's coming. It's time for us to seek cover or figure out what's going on. Yes. And so your instinct and then you have your companion's instinct. It's so important that you sync those. And what's cool is you spend enough time on the road, you are syncing those. And for me, what was so cool is mine were pretty much useless during the day, because that's not their skill. Their safety was dependent upon my ability to protect them from oncoming traffic, right? To get them from point A to point B safely. And then once we made camp, then especially at night, that's when they became the sentinel, right? And I relied on their instincts. Oh my gosh,
majorly. So much of that. Yeah.
How did Kanoa do at night in the tent? Was that cool?
It was amazing. It was incredible to have that, just that level of radar, that level of just the way he would track. And I mean, I'll just never forget it. It just, and the the incredible amount of nights where he would just radar certain things, but just to share, even, because I was scared at times that I'm like, okay, this is new for me. I don't know where I'm gonna. It's not just like, oh, there's a campsite for you here. This is like you are going in a ditch, or you're going in a public park and you're waiting for the sun to go down, or you're going behind the dumpster where the fire, whatever, all these random places. And so having Kanoa as that added radar system that, like, to your point, at night really turns on, and I think just that husky blue heeler, he's just so alert to the smallest things. And yeah, I just would feel it. I'd see and sense when his hairs would go up right away. Even if I was sleeping, he would nudge me or move me, or when something's not right. Amazing.
What about people? Let's talk about families that you stayed with, because I've stayed with hundreds of families on my travels. We'd meet people. People were just so wonderful to us. Aside from the dangers and the threats, when they weren't trying to kill us with their cars or trucks,
yeah,
we had so many people that would stop and say, "Hey, I've got a spare bedroom," or you could pitch your tent in our backyard.
Yes.
But talking about relying on Murphy, not Hudson, because as Ginger was saying, Hudson's like, "Oh, I love everything. Everything's great and cute in Hudson's world. Look at that picture to my right. That smile. That's how Hudson lived." But Murphy was the exact opposite. And there were a couple of times, John, on the road where we had some people, particularly men, that came up and offered us a place to stay for the night. And Murphy came and got between me and them. And I clearly understood that communication, what he was communicating to me. And I turned it down every single time. So I bet, did you stay with families, and did you ever have that sort of weird vibe that, using your instinct, this is not a good situation?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, oh my God, the hospitality, it just opened my world to this level of curiosity and kindness that lives outside of walls and screens. And when you're moving in an unhurried, kind of humble way through a landscape, and just the connections that happen, and that was one of the most transformative parts of the walk. I mean, I stayed with 120 strangers in that initial walk. So while I was doing a lot of dispersed camping, I was staying in front, and this would happen so often where, it would start with, yeah, you can pitch a tent in our front yard. Oh, why don't you come in and join us for dinner? Oh, why don't you take the guests? You know what? Screw that. Take our bedroom. There's a jacuzzi in there. Like, that evolution of trust would show up in such a consistent way across so many different, whether it's individuals or families or couples, or, oh my God, it was overwhelming, and it was incredible. There were a couple times I didn't ever have Kanoa do something like that where he kind of moved in between, which I get that. I could see him maybe doing that. We just didn't have a situation where that was the case, but there were definitely stages where there were a couple of places we stayed where he just didn't want to stay in the house. He was like, I don't want to be in this house. Like, I want to be outside. I don't want to be in this house. You're invited. And so that's when I would make the call and be like, you know what? Thank you for the invite for the guest bedroom. I'm going to just camp outside with my dog, because I don't want him. And I'm going to trust him to we spend every night together. He's not going to be outside. I will be outside with him. We'll have, so never really, and that was 2 or 3 times, never really, understood fully why that was, but I just trusted him. I was like, I'll stay outside.
You have to. It's just that thing that it is really like a 6th or 7th sense. It's something that you just have to learn to trust on the road.
Yeah.
And you do that. Ginger, you're going to say something?
Yeah. Do either of you think that had you not had the dogs with you, that people would have opened up and been so trusting to have you come into their homes?
Go ahead, John.
Good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, Kanoa was such a portal for so many people to come up, feel comfortable. My very first trail angel, which was in Maryland on day 3 of the long walk, was primarily because she is an animal lover and was curious about Kanoa. And so, but I will say too, it was, I've experienced the other side where Kanoa kind of looked like a wolf. And so there were definitely, I experienced people who wouldn't approach because of me having a dog, or people would be more, I felt weariness around people that may have either just have a different relationship to a dog or a negative relationship to a dog. So I experienced both, where I felt like Kanoa was really drawing people in, but also was a limitation in some ways too. Yeah, which was kind of, it was just a curious way, but I would say it leaned more to Kanoa being opening the trust more for people. Yeah,
I would say that it's so interesting to hear your experiences in so many different ways, because I would say for me, it's 100% made a world of difference. I'm a big guy, I was on the road.
Right.
I was stinky most of the time. Of course, I smelled like urine and dogs most of the time.
Totally.
So most people would look at me like, yeah, thanks for nothing. Keep on walking there,
Yeah,
pal. But
totally.
if I had Murphy, maybe it would have been more like you, where some people did sort of, because Murphy
Yeah,
was more of the serious guy, but Hudson was the guy, that the kid
totally.
that cut up in class that made everybody laugh and smile. So I wonder now, hearing you talk about this, I
Yeah,
wonder, I think maybe Hudson was kind of the reason why I got.
yeah,
But you did speak to something I didn't want to let go. Is that 1,000 to 1? My experiences with people on the road was phenomenal, was life
yes,
changing,
yes,
because nobody, until you do it, until you put your life and the
yeah,
life of your companions in the hands of a in the trust of a community, and in the
yeah,
sense of, I'm
yes,
getting on the road, I'm stopping what I'm doing. Like, for me, I sold my truck, I put my stuff into storage.
yeah,
I didn't have a home, I didn't have anything, and I got on the road. So I sort of put my hands into fate,
yes,
into this great community, that the shared community that we all live in. And that was a real interesting experience, because I don't trust people very well. I'm sure Ginger could speak to that at length, but I'm not a very, because anyway,
yeah,
I don't, especially not my companions' lives and
sure,
the people. So there is that trust factor, and I didn't know what my experience of what it was going to be like, and I'm
yeah,
quite certain that I didn't think it was going to be a good thing, but 1,000 to 1, it was life changing.
oh yeah,
People are so good and giving and decent,
mhm,
especially when you see that you have a canine companion. When you've got a companion on the road, that you
yeah,
take good care of them. They know that you're typically a loving, trusting person,
yeah,
and it's life changing. And I will tell you
yes,
this: you never, if you can sit there and watch TV and watch movies your entire lifetime, you don't know the human condition, you don't know
yeah,
human nature in this America, until you get out on the road and you put your life and your life of your companion in the hands of other people. It's life changing, and I recommend it for everyone,
mhm,
that you get to that
absolutely,
point in your life, and something happens where you're looking for answers, you need a little peace in your heart, and you just want to get on the road, and you want to engage people,
yeah,
and it is. And I know you have changed. So it's been so changing. I've seen you change
mhm,
as a person. But before we get into where you're at now, John, I do have to talk about something that I love talking about, because I
yeah,
knew we're going to run long on this episode, because we're not even halfway through my notes, man. But I got to talk about this, because Ginger, it's one that Ginger will love as well. So we talked a little bit about the dangers of life on the road. We kind of
mhm,
covered that. Just, we barely scratched that surface, right?
oh yeah,
But it's so, but but months after months after months of being lonely, being tired, being dirty, being smelling, and having some people treat you not so good, because you do have that. I was denied service at restaurants. You do have that. Life on the road it is a grind. It is hard, and you
yeah,
question everything. You question your
mhm,
existence. So you and I have something interestingly in common that I didn't know, is that there was a time on your walk where you had an alter ego that you changed into. So tell us about you and Cate Blanchett.
oh brother, yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. Oh my God, I weird and amazing, but yes, it was
How did
literally
that
this.
happen? How did that happen?
I think so. This was it. it just happened. I mean, you just, to your point, like there's so much time to be with your own being, and you know, and or not out of your being too, right? Like kind of in another world, because you're flowing and moving at an entirely different pace. And so yeah, it definitely, in the longer stretches of the Midwest, the longer stretches in the deserts, for whatever reason, I mean, I've always loved Cate Blanchett as an actress in her movies. I would have never over identified that way, at least conceptually. But I just would find myself, you know, this is the scene that would generally play out. I would be kind of like, you know, a mile or two into these kind of wide open farm spaces, total like hours, like to your point, you're hours of sweating, stinking, taking a break, you're sweating, you smell, you're licking your sweat, you're drinking your I mean, you're gross. And so there's just, and you know, you got to walk another 10 miles. And so you know, you're in the middle of this. And so I would find myself, and this was consistent, never pre-scripted. I just found myself barefoot with overalls, sometimes with clothing on or under, and standing on a wooden platform, speaking boldly to elected leaders from mostly the U.S., sometimes global audience. I would just, I would be, and I was Cate Blanchett. That was the visual. So the hair was kind of like, you know, sometimes pulled back a little, kind of like Cate Blanchett walking off the farm and stepping on this wooden kind of platform in a stage with a lot of people listening. And I would just go off with that accent about any issue under the sun, anything, climate, life, connection, mental health, earth, love of self, pain, weakness, anger, shame. She'd be cussing up a storm. I'd be cussing up a storm. I'd be like yelling, but then I'd bring everybody back in, and I just a hot mess. And it was amazing.
This story is so fascinating to me because the same thing happened to me, but I shared this story with you because for me, for some reason, I was just on the road for so many days, talking to myself, thinking inside my inside my head, living inside my head, alone in a tent, you know, with the music of the night being my only company, and then almost being run over by so many people on the road, and almost hit, and just, I think my brain, my personality just fractured, and I became Doc Holliday. And I didn't become the Dennis Quaid Doc Holliday. I became the Val Kilmer Doc Holliday because I absolutely loved Tombstone. And so I just started walking, and I was walking, and I would just say, "You hear that, darling? That's Latin. Evidently, Johnny Ringo is an educated man. Now I really hate him." And that's a really bad version. I never try to do it, you know, ad hoc or on spec, but it's a terrible, terrible version. I could do a better job, I assure you. But I just started walking.
Crazy.
Well, yeah, I'll get to Ginger in a second because she's a part of this. So I just would walk, and I would just look at traffic, and I'm like, evidently Johnny Ringo is an educated man. Now I'm really, and I would just go through all of the quotes of Tombstone and like, you know, you're no easy at all. And then there was that, and then I just started doing, I'm a righteous man. I'm a righteous man. And I called Ginger. I was at the end of it was a really brutal long stretch. I think I'd finally made it to, I don't know, I think I'd Delaware or something. And I called Ginger after spending a week, literally not showering, maybe 2 weeks, nothing, no services or anything. And I just called her and I just kept saying, I'm a righteous man. I'm a righteous man. And go ahead, you tell your side of the story.
It is amazing.
You know, I you know, that just makes my skin crawl for you to even say it now. No.
Because Ginger's like, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Or do you need medical assistance? What does that mean? You're a righteous man. Are you in trouble? Should I call for somebody to come pick you up off the side of the road? I'm like, I'm a righteous man. Yes. So I guess my personality just split, and I just became this other thing, and and I did it. And like you said, it was not scripted. I didn't
No.
plan on it. And I don't know why I picked it. I picked it. I selected
Yes.
Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday
Oh,
as my alter ego, but that's the
it's
one I went
amazing.
with. And I got to tell you, the funny thing about this though is that Ginger knew. Ginger knew by that time my walk had ended, so I had shared all those stories, and Ginger understood what I was going through. What Doc Holliday was sort of me, sort of, a way to rationalize that. I still had months and months on this walk of loneliness and pain. And so that was how I dealt with it. But then
Yeah.
you and I met in Colorado for the
Mhm.
first time, and I confided in you, and I shared that story with you because I was like, John was did I have a psychotic break? I turned into Doc Holliday. What was going on? Did that ever happen to you? And then you told me about the Cate Blanchett
Yes.
story, and I'm like, holy Christ! And I couldn't wait to talk to Ginger. I'm like, Ginger, it happened to John. The same thing
This
happened
is
to
the thing.
John. John split into a different personality. But get this, John's a 6'4" dude. He turned into Cate Blanchett. I turned into Doc Holliday. He turned into Cate Blanchett.
It's
John,
amazing.
I'm just going to say, I'm glad that you weren't calling me when you were Cate Blanchett.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, for
But,
real.
Drove
but
me
you
crazy.
you at least were thinking about Cate Blanchett having some socially responsible thing to say to the world, to the
Oh,
global community.
yes.
I'm out there just quoting Tombstone like a moron, like the moron I am. So,
Oh my
Let's be clear
gosh.
though.
but
I mean, it's not, there's no, this is a different realm.
it
Like
is.
she might be, yeah, socially, yeah, calling some shit out, but she is, she, it was, it would
There,
have been
there
just
really
as,
are. There are just no
yeah,
words for it. You
there's
can't.
just no words. This is
But
not,
it is. But that's the point. There's nothing that you and I, John, could do to explain to Ginger what happened on the road, why it happened, and what life on the road is. And you and I really, and the very small handful of people do. And I want to speak to this briefly because there's so much more to cover. What
yeah.
you're doing now. But I remember meeting somebody. I think I met somebody at a park in Virginia, and he was training to do the AT.
Mhm.
And we were talking about had been training for months and months, and clearly he had all the physical skills and all of the physical capabilities that I didn't have when I started my first walk, and I don't have yet for 3 months out from walk three.
I love
Still
it.
eating
Oh,
Twinkies and
what's training?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
still, well, that's something else.
Trainings.
But I was talking to him, and he was a former military professional, and he was so laser-like focused, and he was so analytical about it. And he
Mhm.
had these sayings that he said things like failure is not an option, or the impossible is only a degree of difficulty. And he had all these sayings, and
Mm.
I'm thinking, this guy is not going to make it. He's not going to make it. And I'd already been on the road from Austin to Virginia, so I knew what would take it to make it pretty much. And there's a degree of insanity and craziness that's a component
Yeah.
of successful people who successfully make it from point A to point B on very
Mhm.
long distance walks that take
Mhm.
months and years. And I want to ask you first off, what do you think about it? If you had, from all of your vastly your more your you've walked more miles than I have, many more miles than I have. So all of that, if you had to reduce it down to one or two things, what makes the difference between somebody that actually finishes it or somebody that doesn't?
Wow. Yeah. It's a great question. I think, yeah, you're touching on some of it with your story. I definitely, the I think the lack of just, I think releasing the grip over any kind of outcome or over planning. I think there's something to be said about a structure that helps you to lean in and kind of, make the choice and get started, get like kind of convince the brain that we're going to be all right. Just, but from from a day to day, are you willing to be to be like, the word that comes is emergent, but I don't want to, it's a little conceptual. It's more just like, can you adapt in the moment? From that instinct, that place of instinct and intuition around your own safety and your own like hard decisions, but also, pivot your route, change if you need to. So that ability to tease adaptation and be with adaptation, that feels huge. Just huge.
You have to be. That's essential. If you have a structure, if you have that actually speaks a lot to what my assessment of this gentleman was, is that he had a plan. He had everything scripted. He had everything planned. So many miles in this, and I'm thinking already, it's like, yep, that's just about maybe a week or two into your walk. That's going to go out the window, because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
All of it. Yeah,
absolutely. And so. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. Don't you have to give up a certain amount of control because you can't predict what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes? I mean, you can control some things. And it sounds like this gentleman he had everything packaged up and said he wanted to have control over everything. And I'm sure he found out real quick that he didn't.
Yeah.
That's right. You can't go into it with structure, because you can have a plan. And thankfully, that's what I did smartly in my first walk. And I think you did the same thing, or have done the same thing. Is people like, did you know where you were going? I'm like, no, I had a general direction. But as I neared, I wanted to go assess the environment, the conditions, and get to know that area and terrain, and then make that assessment, because you have to adapt every stage of the walk. Yes. It's constant adaptation. Especially when you're living on the road and you're having to survive with finding water and food. I had the benefit of, I had people shipping stuff, supplies for me and my dogs along the way. Yeah. But still, there were times where I had to find my own water. And that's the difference between an extreme heat exhaustion situations. Right. That's the difference between life and death sometimes. So adaptation is certainly a part of it. But the other thing in talking to this fella, he talked about all the great things that he was going to see, all the beauty that he was going to see. And I think, to me, that defined it. I'm thinking, yeah. And when I talk to people that want to do something like this, because again, I encourage everyone to do something great for something they love in life, whatever it is. But what I've learned is that if you see this only for the glory, you're gonna miss the grind. Oh, yeah. Because in life, there is no glory without the grind, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my one saying that I've learned most in life. There is no glory without the grind. And life on the road is a grind, day in, day out, and you never know where it's gonna come from and how hard it's gonna be. And so that's something that people just don't appreciate, because they look at guys like Bear Grylls or people that do these extreme things and they think, what's walking, on a road cross country going to be like? Yeah. But it's tough, it's hard, and it's a small fraternity for a reason, because people do get killed. And I know for walk 3, I'm only doing a 300-mile stretch from the Adirondacks to New York City. And a lot of that is Highway 9. But even still, it's those 4-lane highways that have zero visibility, where you've got, cliffs on your left side, you have a razor thin shoulders, and you've got traffic traveling at you at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, especially especially when we live in a society where people are always constantly distracted by their cell phones. And I don't know how many times you've almost gotten taken out by people texting, but I think I've invented cuss words for those people. I have a special type of pain for those people. But absolutely, it is dangerous. So I want to segue from the dangers and the reality on the road to the lessons that you've learned from it. So do you have like that? You understand that that's the grind, that's the reality of the road, but you see so much glory. You want to share that glory. You want to share that glory, the great, beautiful sunrises. This is what I love about you. I want to also do the same thing, but you actually have really made it part of your life mission to try to get people to go partake in the beauty of walking outdoors. So tell us, Jon, what are you doing now, and how are you spreading that with people?
I love it. Yeah, it just became, and it's very much what you said. It's kind of I often describe it as kind of like, both feet. One foot is kind of the grief or the grind or the devastation of things, just whatever they are in us, around us. But like the other foot is like the beauty, the wonder, the trees, I'm absolutely a tree hugger. So like there's a lot of that. The tension of that to me is so important. So a lot of my work, I consider myself now, I call it like a walking artist, because this has been, I just, on that walk in 2010, I reached, not at all consistent all the time, but I reached steady places of mental health and connection health, and just whatever kind of health you want to frame it. I just reached like, there were moments that were showing up often where I felt so connected and just open and relate. So it stuck with me. The benefits of that really stuck with me, and very specifically connected to your point on connecting with people, the hundreds of people I would walk with. I was super aware of what would happen as I would move next to people, strangers, new people who would join me, and the dynamics of how after 20, 30 minutes, we were exchanging kind of conversation around life things that were just so, it just wouldn't happen if we weren't moving together in that sort of way. If we were inside, if we were doing something, some other form of discourse, like the fact that their physical body, whether on foot or on a wheelchair, is moving with me, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. Our bodies are physiologically moving forward. We're under this spacious open sky. I mean, all these things were those were really loud signals around public health and community connection, and people feeling like they can kind of get out what they want to get out, whether it's messy, angry shit or dreaming and positive, joyful stories. And so I started this, I just experimented after the long walk. I'm like, I got to keep walking for my own sanity, health, and I want to invite other people. So I started this experiment called Walk to Connect, and we just got a lot of people trained as walking leaders and hosted walking events, and lots of long distance things, lots of neighborhood community things, lots of cross-cultural things. That was for many years, and that's still going on. I would say now it's a little bit of that. It's really me. I've always been an artist, and so I have my sketchbook in my backpack. I document a lot of videos. So we're talking about the safety components of streets and vehicles. Like there's a campaign called Pedestrian Dignity that I do a lot of storytelling around just overall pedestrian safety and accessibility, and but then just riff a lot on the beauty for health, for connection, for nature. So I'm all just experimenting with all of that as an artist. And
you are a John Denver type character in the sense that you are all the nature. You're the real deal. That's why people meet me and they always had this belief that I was a mixture of like Bear Grylls and Gandhi. I'm like, that's not me. That's Jonathon Stalls that you're looking for. That's the guy you're looking for over there. Because I follow you on Instagram, John, and you for real legit write poetry, and you share some really moving, powerful poetry, and it seems like most of it is inspired from your connectivity to nature, right?
Very much. Yeah, I mean, I describe it a lot. That long walk, again, I reference it back to that kind of rite of passage experience for me. It was really where I shifted a lot of my kind of, who are my teachers, who are my guides, in a sense. And how many moments with the trees and the water and the sky and other people from that walking vantage point. Those became my most trusted guides, and obviously Kanoa and animals and just the different, so all those things. Yeah, very much.
The walking artist. I love that title.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about offline more so, something that I'm dipping my toes into right now, because I feel like I've lived my life the last 15 years as an artist telling a story about dogs with cancer.
Yeah.
And my canvas has been a different sort, and most of it's been writing. and
Yep.
I do write poetry as well, but I'm also
Yeah.
getting to illustrations and looking at different things like AI to depict,
Great.
my travels and journeys. So I'm getting into NFTs. And so
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about you and you as an artist, have you thought about NFTs and how you can translate sort of your artwork and being a walking artist into NFTs and make a bit of a living off that? Have you looked into that?
It's a great question. So yeah, a lot of my artwork is pen and ink drawing. So I do art markets, and that's a lot of how I make this work. And I have been trying. So when I first heard of NFTs and just all of it, it went so over my head. I'm like, wait, wait, what? What? You don't actually have the print in your hand? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm like, I
They
don't
It
get
just-
still, it still goes over Ginger's head every
it's
time I
still-
use the word NFT. Yeah.
So
Sometimes
over
it
my
just
head.
goes,
I just, yeah, the cloud that I tried to, I just was like, all right, I'm gonna get back to the ground, hug the trees, let it go. And so, and yet I've been tracking it still, and I have lots of people who are like, dude, you got to try this, lean in. And just in the last month or two, I've had some friends who have been putting their photos on there and getting them in the marketplace around all that. And it's just been like, I just got I just sold it, or I just got a photo from as an NFT, and I now can pay for the front porch remodel in my house. And I'm like, wait, what?
what?
And so,
It's legit.
$8,000 because someone wants your digital, the digital rights to your photo, but not really rights. They're more just on the blockchain, because what? Who? Like you mean like a chain link fence? What do you mean?
And you have to write
$8,000.
a contract on the blockchain. It's like, okay, contracts on blockchains, but it without certainly going too far down that badger nest, which it really is. I've been studying NFTs for the past many months, and I actually have legit artists that are translating that artwork that I'm talking to and following their work. So I am a firm, despite the chaos in the crypto market. Look, art is art, and there's always going to be artists trying to share their human experience, whether it's the loss of a dog with cancer, or it's the love of nature and getting outdoors with your companion. We're always trying to translate that experience to other people, to try to get them to have that inflection point, to have that impact them as it's impacted them in their own lives. So without going definitely too far down NFTs, I'm certainly that will be a big part of my future, and I'm fairly knowledgeable about it, and I'm at the point where I'm going to start sharing my knowledge with other people, and I'm going to have an NFT expert on Fuzzybutts and Friends. So I'll make sure I get that episode over to you.
Yes.
And we talk about it, because you would do so well. It's a great community, because at the end of the day, they're legit artists, and you certainly are, like you said, a walking artist. As we kind of wind things down here, talk about another medium for your artwork, something that I haven't done yet, which I'm going to do very, very soon. You've written a book about your travels. Tell us about Walk.
Yay. Thank you for asking.
Congratulations, man. That's so awesome. Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
so proud.
Oh my gosh.
Proud of you. I really am.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, here I've got, this is the this is the advanced copy that they just sent me. So this has been a long, messy, hard, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. As someone who touches a lot of different things and people and projects similar to you, Luke, I know it's hard to put all of that into this binded space. Poetry and quick form writing is so much more my flow. And so this was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was, it just felt right. Like, for so many years, like I had all the stories from the cross country walk, or a lot of them in a journal, all written out. For many years, I was like, I've got these stories, and this could be a journey from day one to day 242 kind of thing. Here it is. All the journal entries are here. It just never, because I was connecting so much to the benefits, but also the kind of the injustices of being a pedestrian and safety and accessibility. And I just was learning so much also about systems and public health and nature connection, just from a practice. So not just a cross country vantage point, but like right outside the front door for anybody. And all of that was kind of in this twisted, wild web of things for years. And I just never felt, it just wasn't time. I just was like in that back to that instinct, intuition. It's just like, it's just not time. And if I could choose to force this, but I don't want to force it. And then a couple of years ago, what was it? It was 3 years ago. This is just some encouragement for anybody wanting to write a book on anything. I sent out the proposal to 6 or 7 publishers and got rejected by all of them. And it was humbling. And I'm like, okay, well, there's clarity there. But 2 out of the 7 were like, we really like the concept, work on your writing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to work on the writing. And they said, get back to us within a year or whenever you're feeling ready. And so I took 6 months to kind of pause. And then I discerned like, okay, I am ready to maybe consider this, and revisited the writing, revisited kind of the development of how do I see this book, and put a lot of work into it at that stage, resubmitted to the publisher I really wanted to work with, which I was grateful. They were one of the ones that were open, and they accepted it. And it was amazing. So ever since that point, then that's been the last year and a half. And the book releases in August, and it's imperfect, it's wild, it's artistic, it's creative nonfiction. It's mostly stories and practices, because I care so much about people just trying it on for themselves. So similar to what you were saying, Luke, about just encouraging people to have these kind of wild and wonderful experiences, gritty, grinding experiences around things they love or care about. Same with this book. It's really, the subtitle is Slow Down, Wake Up, and Connect at 1 to 3 miles an hour. And so the stories and practices are, they're rooted in that theme, like slowing down, smelling the roses, hugging the trees. Absolutely. But the waking up is the part that I've only gotten more into some justice themed work, because I've walked with so many people from different backgrounds and learned more about how do we make our streets safer for walking and pedestrian activity. And so there's a lot of stuff that challenges kind of it's not anti-car. It's just it's kind of like, how do we decenter the automobile a little? How do we make more room for people walking, for their health and for connection? And then the third, that kind of connection piece, as you and I know so well, and the field of what is possible related to connecting what is good in each of us when we're outside and moving and building trust and leaning into trust a little bit more, not perfectly, but just when we can move in an unhurried way, humbly and smelly, and kind of just be in that together, we realize like we actually have a lot more in common, and there is a lot we can connect on when we're not kind of, and I care about that so much. Ever since that long walk, cross-country walk, staying with 120 strangers and walking with hundreds of people, I'm like, there is a world of connection that is not being tapped into enough. And the way we're made to be moving is one way that can help us connect there. So a lot of the first chapter is is called Walking as Human Dignity. And so it's just that very basic, not overly complicated, but complicated when so much of our systems kind of isolate us from each other. So a simple walk with a loved one you're in conflict with, or with someone you don't necessarily agree with or understand, or someone you just stumble upon, can heal the world in a sense. So
that's so true. Especially now, we're so disconnected. I just think as a society, and the pandemic has made it even more so.
oh my gosh, yes.
And I can't work on societal ills is certainly not my interest. I only care about two things. I'm notorious for saying on the show, dogs in the future. That's all I really care about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do feel like dogs are a point of that type of connectivity
Absolutely.
for us as people, because I so
Absolutely.
often talk in the scientific world about dogs being a good model for us understanding cancer in people, but
Yeah.
dogs are just a great model for us understanding to be human, for
Yes.
humanity.
Absolutely.
And you understand, and that's something that I've learned from my travels, John, and I know as you have, but I like what you said, and that's where I'm at, that you felt like you just weren't ready to tell your story, because
Yeah.
after my first walk from Austin to Boston, it's 2,400 miles over 2 years on the road. I stayed with hundreds of people. It just was such a
Mhm.
rich, full, phenomenal experience. We started a foundation that's just done such great works and everything. But after my first walk, within a couple of weeks, Murphy, who walked with me, he
Yeah.
started bleeding out of his nose, and it turned out to be cancer.
Mhm.
So I was in Colorado with Ed,
Mhm.
Jeanette
Mhm.
Thompson. She was going to be the editor for my book, and she and I were
Mhm.
working on the manuscript. And so when Murphy was diagnosed with cancer, I'm like, man, I just stopped everything I was doing in
Yeah.
life and just sold my truck and put my stuff into storage and
100%.
just walked 2,400 miles with my dog, and had this great, beautiful experience. And within weeks, he
Mhm.
gets cancer. And
Mhm.
so, Jeanette, God bless her.
Oh,
God bless her. She passed. She put up with so much with me, but I'm like, I don't know how to tell my story now. And so
mhm.
we put together a manuscript, but with trying to deal with Murphy and his cancer, and we went through radiation out when we were in Colorado. I did the best that I could to try to tell my story, but I'm like, I don't. It was supposed to be dog gets cancer, passes away, inspires person to walk with two other dogs for cancer, gets across country, starts a foundation. That's the story, right? Then Murphy
Mhm.
gets cancer, and I don't know how to tell the story anymore. But I realized much bigger than that, I really just didn't know how to tell my story and what I was
Yeah.
trying to tell.
Yes.
And I, even after my second walk, after I lost Murphy, my West Coast walk, I feel like I want to tell it, but I still don't have any idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important that when you realize that
So
and
important.
appreciate it,
Yes.
because I think that you're given one chance sometimes, is that you do all these things and they're good. And you have one chance to understand what you're trying to share with
Yeah.
people, and that what that experience meant to you and the value that you derived from it, and why other people should do that. And that's really kind of a sacred thing. So I, in a kind of a long-winded way, where I'm at right now is I'm kind of where you're at a year ago, where after
Yeah.
losing Hudson, it sort of brought my whole story together. My
Mhm.
first walk was the Rock, was Malcolm, that changed my life. The second walk was Murphy, the Ripple and the Foundation. And the
Yeah.
third walk, which is going to be at walk 3 in September, is the river. So my story is the Rock, the Ripple, and the river. And I realized that I was never able to tell that story until after I lost Hudson. I don't think I can now, but I think after this walk, I think I have an understanding of what the river in life means. That
Mm.
that there's this great thing in life, this great river that rages, and we don't know where it begins, and we certainly have no idea where it's going or its outcome. And it's this crazy, beautiful, wild ride that we're all on.
Yeah.
And that takes years of loss and love and traveling and meeting so many people and seeing and talking to them and learning their own journeys. It really takes all of that to be able to say, I'm finally at that point to tell my story. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you
Mm.
got to that point, and I'm almost
Thank
there,
you.
because you have a beautiful story, John. You said it best. There is no other way to describe it. You are a walking artist, my friend. You
Yes.
are a beautiful man. You are a beautiful man.
Likewise,
So
both
we
of
got,
you.
let's,
Thank you.
before we wrap it up,
Yeah.
talking about lessons, let's give a lesson, one lesson or so you have for other travelers out there. What would you
Hmm.
tell them?
Hmm. Wow. Yeah.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Oh my gosh. I would say one of the things that I find, um, just be really, there's so many things, but I'll
There
just say the
are.
one that came up to my head. It's just as you're out, or as you're thinking about being out, moving in this way or moving in your own way, I just how can some of the behaviors and patterns of what you're just relishing in or awestruck by or maybe that are profound for you, like how can those integrate into your life wherever you go after the adventure or the specific container of the trip? Like what in little ways, in larger ways, how can those behaviors or moments be integrated right out your front door? Like just in small ways, simple ways. That would be some advice, because there's so much beauty in the adventure trip, and that just breaks open and breaks up all the defaults a lot. But there's a lot of that lives right outside our front door, that doesn't have to be inside of the adventure trip. And so just encouraging how that could integrate. Yeah.
So that's a good message for travelers. Now, what message would you have for somebody like me that had I not gotten out and walked from Austin to Boston, my first walk, and the second walk after I lost Murphy? I'm the kind of guy, John, that would I grieve internally. I would have just lost my dog to cancer, gotten on whatever social media and just cried and raged on that for years and years, and probably ended up in a bottle. So the people that internalize grief and loss, the people that have a dog that have lost a companion with cancer, or that are going through that, what message do you have to pet parents out there to encourage them to get out of yourself, get out of your grief, and get outside with your companion? What would you like to say to them?
Yeah, oh my gosh. This is no surprise coming from me, but it's the really the tenderness and the wisdom of just slowly moving with trees, especially with trees and flowing water. If you have a creek or a river or a stream near you, and being in a place where you are protecting time to slowly move with those things. So it's a difference between kind of just landing on it and engaging with it, but actually, like, I'm going to protect some time tomorrow for an hour to just slowly move with a stream or with the trees. And I'm going to specifically do it during sunset or sunrise in this really liminal, transitional, mystic time. Like, there is so much I find that can just I always talk about it. There's a practice that I have in the book called Nature Sees Me. And it's just this, it can sound silly, but it just the invitation of, like, believing just the way that your pup and your pet and your dog mirrors back to you. Like, the mirroring that happens between us and our animals is so profound, is so cosmic, it's so deep, and leaning into how that can show up in kind of a tree landscape with birds and flowing water. I do it all the time. And
you sound a little like Bob Ross, so you definitely would be great in the NFT world. That was very Bob Ross of you. But I love what you said, John, is compressed time, because that's what we're trying to do when we have something that we love in our life, when we have a fuzzy butt in our life that we value and we love. That we wanted two things. We want to slow down entropy. We want that love to last as long as possible.
Yes.
And then we want to compress that time. And you really can't compress time indoors when you're living this crazy life that we're all living in, this crazy life in one shape or form. That's the reason to stop, take your companion, get outdoors and compress time, because we're all losing time.
Yeah.
And that's the most valuable resource. So Bob Ross, thank you for showing up on Fuzzybutts and Friends. I love Bob. Hey, have you watched the documentary about Bob Ross? You got to check that out.
No, I need to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah, you totally got to check it out. Ginger, we have done a lot. This is definitely the longest episode that we've done, but man, I could talk to you for at least another hour.
Totally, man. Yes.
We're missing several things that I didn't even get to. But Ginger, did we miss anything big? Did I screw anything up this time?
Not that I know of. I always kind of have a cancer tip, and it seems like you all have talked about this one a lot, is odors, since you guys were all stinky. So one of the things that I wanted to say is if your dog has a particular odor, we like to say loud as in strong odor, check, it could be a tumor in their mouth. It could be a nasal tumor. There could be something wrong with their stomach. So make sure you always don't say, oh, they're just stinky. Go have it checked out from a veterinarian.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's one of the 10 early warning signs of cancer that the foundation has put together. Loud smells is particularly true, like in oral melanoma. Dog's breath can stink, but sometimes there are smells that you just need to get checked out. So Ginger, thanks. We always need to be reminded that Fuzzybutts and Friends is about Fuzzybutts and our friends, but it's also about cancer and our companion animals. So thank you for that weekly tip.
You're welcome.
Speaking of weekly, Fuzzybutts and Friends is we drop every Tuesday. We're available on all the major podcast platforms and our YouTube channel, Fuzzybutts. Actually, I got screwed that up. It's fuzzybuttsstudios.com and .org. That's our YouTube channel. Jon, is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience before we go today?
Oh, just grateful to be with you all. So grateful. Yeah, thank you. And please feel connected if you want to lean in. The book comes out in August. You can pre-order it. Lots of practices.
Where do we find you on? Where do we find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find my artwork is at Intrinsic Paths. So that's a lot of my pen and ink art stuff. That's kind of how I shape the walking artist thing. Anything you could look up Walk to Connect. We still do a lot of things through there. And then the Pedestrian Dignity campaign that is a lot of my kind of fiery organizing work around safety and dignity for pedestrians. So any of those things, and Patreon is the main way that I support myself as a creator. So if you use Patreon or you want to support, that's a great way.
And where can we pre-order the book?
Oh, so if you go to, you can go to Penguin Random House. You can just type in Jonathan's Walk book, Jonathon Stalls, Penguin Random House, or North Atlantic Books. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jon, you truly are a friend of the Fuzzybutts. You are welcome back here anytime to talk about your crazy, crazy adventures, your wonderful walks. You're an inspiration to us all. To me in particular, you're what I want to be tomorrow. In fact, if you want to do walk 3 and I'll stay here and sell
well,
NFTs.
we might link up, man. You're doing your walk in September?
Yeah. So I'm doing, it's just a 10-week 300-mile walk, but I'm doing it with my gimpy three-legged Great Pyrenees. So he's kind of handicapped us. So what would take me normally 2 weeks is going to take me 10 weeks. It's only 300 miles, but it's going to be a crazy cool adventure. So in all seriousness, we need to talk offline and figure out how I can get back, how we can get back on the road together to be walking artists together. Let's get back on the road together and let's make art together, my friend. Let's do that.
Done.
Jon, I love you, brother, my brother. You truly are a brother to me, and you're welcome back here anytime to talk about your art, our shared love of dogs, and anything else, my friend.
Thank you. Love always, y'all.
Jon.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode of Fuzzybutts and Friends. Puppy up. Talk soon.